is absolutely correct that it is a difficult situation in Afghanistan. Those of us who watch Afghanistan right now are familiar that with the fact that the Taliban seems to be militarily ascendant, at least in certain areas, gaining ground in provincial areas and outlying areas. So I think that the question that I would want to ask you, and bearing in mind that Pakistan will bear the impact of intensified civil war in Afghanistan. And Pakistan has played, of course, an important role in the peace process and has influence with the Taliban, which is now ascendant. You said it's important that we do it right, but it is hard to do it right. And what would you want to see in terms of U.S. policy with Afghanistan as it relates to Pakistan? What do you think the U.S. should be doing in Afghanistan?
Again, I think, Afghanistan, and I've been working on this relationship now for many years directly, and for some decades indirectly. And particularly for the past 20 years, we did have, I would say, our differences on how to do it. And that is how I believe Afghanistan for some time did become a contention in our relationship. But today, clearly, I think Afghanistan is a convergence between Pakistan and United States, because you do want to see peace and stability. We certainly want to see peace and stability. We want all the parties to get to some understanding which results in an inclusive end state in Afghanistan. You want to see reduction in violence. We want to see reduction in violence. And I think that provides us with a huge basis to work from. And now the question is that what is it that we can do together in terms of supporting the peace process? Because really, Ambassador, and I'll be very candid with you and through you with your audience, because today when I look at the papers in the morning and I listen to some of the discussions taking place across the think tank circuit, the whole conversation in Washington, D.C. has come around to the protection of embassy, securing of the airport, and the visas for the Afghan interpreters, which is frankly not what it should be. We believe that the best investing in peace in Afghanistan is basically the best counter-terrorism measure and best guarantee against fighting terrorism in Afghanistan. And why I say that, I'd like to explain that also, because clearly, I hear a lot of conversation about over-the-horizon capacity, about countries in the region providing bases. But then the conversation should be about what we can do to make the peace process successful. Because if the peace process is successful, you will have a partner government in Afghanistan. You will have people you could work with in Afghanistan. And similarly, I think peace process has to be basically, the intra-Afghan negotiations have been obviously complicated and has been difficult. But if you look at how things have played out, and I have always maintained that if the US-Taliban negotiations were maybe 3 on a scale of 1 to 10 in terms of complexity, the intra-Afghan negotiations are at least 8 or 9 in terms of complexity. So if It took United States maybe a year and a half to get to a point where you could actually agree on some basics. Then intra-Afghan process perhaps would have or should take longer. And if that time frame is reduced because there is a date for your withdrawal from Afghanistan, then I think that should be made up by putting more capital behind or in support of the peace process. So what is it that US, Pakistan, and not just United States and Pakistan, I think what is it that China, Russia, Iran can do to support the peace process? And I think the Afghan parties need to hear it. Both parties, the Taliban and the Afghan government, need to hear it very clearly and very loudly. And I think the extended Troika declaration, which again is a reflection of the broad regional consensus of all the key players and of all the countries that have, over the past many years, invested in various ways in the peace process, have some channels of communication with Taliban and the national government also. So, and that those two declarations clearly, I think, provide that basis for all of our countries to work together, perhaps with greater political capital into the peace process.